for being here with us. Thank you for those who have come, those who may be coming on their way in. Give them safety protection. Be with us this evening. Help us to have an enjoyable time and learn a lot from this brain health talk that we're going to be listening to. This I pray in Jesus' name, amen.
All right.
All right, Doug.
All right, I'm up. All right, so I'm calling this Be Brain Strong. And I'm going to give you guys 6 goals for what we call cognitive fitness. And so I'm going to start this off with, who am I? Who's this guy talking to, right? So first of all, my name is Doug Mapp. As she said earlier, I'm a board-certified cognitive development professional. I know, sounds fancy, right? It just means that I help brain train people. I help their brains get a little bit stronger. I've been doing that for the last 7+ years. I'm one of the main administrators at our LearningRx here in Knoxville. There's an actual location where I work and perform. And I have experience in, of course, cognitive assessments and in what they call the CHC, which is a intellectual methodology. It's like the world's most widely known and used and implemented brain-based skill development. And I help children, adults, and professionals strengthen their memory, attention, and their reasoning. Okay? I'm also the founder of a company called Think Up, which I'm really, really proud of. It's a cool AI company that's coming to a neighborhood near you pretty soon, right? And it's about how we can help apply brain science to improve decision-making and performance, right? And so everything I do is about how do we think better. And so that's me, of course, talking to people, professionals downtown in Knoxville on the right, so up here, right? And then here's where me at the center with the team, some of the team. All right, so why is this important? What are we going to be talking about today? All right, so what is brain health? Some social concerns that currently exist that you guys are probably not aware of. 6 goals of brain health, and then cognitive training at LearningX and kind of what that looks like. And then we'll do a couple examples of brain training, so we'll be a little interactive. And of course, we can have a little Q&A at the end for sure. But initially, I'm going to ask the question to you guys, what is brain health? What do you think brain health is? You in the middle. Okay, that's an interesting one. Okay. Keeping your brain healthy. So you know how to do that? No, that's why I'm here. Oh, I suspect that actually most people don't know how to do that. Right? We know kind of how to keep our body healthy, and if you think about looking around the people around us, you can go, most of us don't do that well, myself included, from a physical standpoint, right? So I'm trying to get better at that. I probably look okay right now, but I'm trying to get even in better shape. So, but anyways, we're going to talk about brain health. I'm going to answer that question right now, right? So what is brain health? Brain health refers, and you can read some of this thing stuff with me, to how well a person's brain functions across several areas, right? And according to the National Institute of Aging, or on aging, brain health refers to how well our brain functions in several areas. So we have our motor function, right, which is controlling our movements. We have our sensory function, which is seeing, hearing, tasting, and smelling. We also have what we call our tactile functions, which we can feel stuff, right? I can feel this. I can feel the air moving across my skin, and even pressure and pain. We have our emotional function, which is interpreting and responding to emotions, of course. And then finally, we have our cognitive health, which is thinking, learning, and remembering. And that's going to be our focus today, cognitive health or fitness, right? And how that makes better. Yeah, it didn't fall. It just got tapped in the mic. All right, so why is that all important? So why is all that important, right? So I want to go to probably my number one social concern currently right now. And I believe, I've been reading studies for several years, which you're about to see a video from a doctor that's going to talk about cognitive concerns in kids. But this is something we've been seeing kind of moving or progressing towards this way for several years. All right? And so big, big, big problem now. And so as any study goes, right, as any study goes, most of the things that we're going to be looking at and dealing with, we're lagging. So I'm telling you something that we studied, that we measured years ago, but we now understand it today. So this is old, new information, right? So we should be more concerned now. All right, so check this out. This is the video. So sound.
My name is Dr. Jared Cooney-Horvath. I'm a former teacher turned cognitive neuroscientist who focuses on human learning. And I do not receive funding, nor have I ever, from big tech. So a sad fact our generation has to face is this. Our kids are less cognitively capable than we were at their age. Since we've been standardizing and measuring cognitive development since the late 1800s, every generation has outperformed their parents. And that's exactly what we want. We want sharper kids. And the reason for this largely has been school. Each generation spends more time in school. We use school to develop our cognition. Congratulations, you see your correlation. Until Gen Z. Gen Z is the first generation in modern history to underperform us on basically every cognitive measure we have, from basic attention to memory to literacy to numeracy to executive functioning to even general IQ, even though they go to more school than we did. So why? What happened? What happened around 2010 that decoupled schooling from cognitive development? It can't be school. Schools basically look the same. It can't be biology. This hasn't had enough time to change. The answer appears to be the tools we are using within schools to drive that learning. Across 80 countries, as Jean was just saying, if you look at the data, once countries adopt digital technology widely in schools, performance goes down significantly, to the point where kids who use computers about 5 hours per day in school for learning purposes will score over 2/3 of a standard deviation less than kids who rarely or never touch tech at school. And that's across 80 countries. Bring it home to the US. Let's go to the US. We have our NAEP. That's our big data. Take any state. Here's a fun experiment you can try. Take any state NAEP data. Compare that to when that state adopted one-to-one technology widely, and watch what happens. The NAEP data will plateau and then start to drop. Now, as Jean said, of course, this is all correlative. What we really want is causative. To get causation, what you need is academic research, and you need mechanisms, explanations for why we're seeing what we're seeing. Luckily, we have academic research stretching back to 1962 that shows the exact same story for 60 years. When tech enters education, learning goes down. In fact, one of the biggest ed psychologists right now, Dylan William out of the UK, recently said, ed tech is a revolution that's been coming for 60 years. And we're gonna have to wait another 60 because it ain't doing anything. Now that's research, but now we need mechanisms. Luckily, over the last about 2 decades, we've been doing a lot of work in what we call the science of learning. How do human beings learn? And we now have the clear understanding of why tech does not work for learning, and it is all biological. It's not that the tech isn't being used well enough, we haven't been trained enough, we need better programs. It's we have evolved biologically to learn from other human beings, not from screens. And screens circumvent that process. I won't go too deeply into the mechanisms, they can get boring, but just know they're there if you want to talk about them. So that leaves us with 2 options. Option 1, when you know something is wrong, do better. So we could just say, hey, mea culpa, get some of this tech out of schools, go back to what we know works, some analog methods, cool. Or 2, we could redefine our terms. We could redefine what it means to be an effective learner. I want to end with one quick story here. Think back to your childhood, to your schooling. I guarantee all of us at one point took a test on reading comprehension. And the way it looked is this. Here's a passage of about 750 words. Here are 10 to 12 questions about that passage. Most of them are inferential, not factual. They're asking you to go beyond what you just read to see what you understood. Cool. Last year, the SATs had a reading comprehension section. Here's what it looked like. Here is a single sentence of 75 words. Here is one question, fact-based, about that sentence. Next. Here is another sentence of 75 words. Here is one question about that sentence. Next. Last year, they redefined reading comprehension to mean 54 short sentences with one question about each. That is skimming. That's not reading. Why would we ever do that? Because what do kids do on computers? They skim. So rather than determining what do we want our children to do and gearing education towards that, we are redefining education to better suit the tool. That's not progress, that is surrender. So as we go through our discussion today, there's gonna be a lot of talk about smartphones and social media, rightly so. But I'm the voice here to remind you that even in schools. It doesn't matter what the size of the screen is, if it's a phone, if it's a laptop, if it's a desktop, and it doesn't matter who bought it. Is it school sanctioned? Does it have the word education stamped on it? It doesn't matter. All of these things are also gonna hurt learning, which in turn are gonna hurt our kids' cognitive development, right at the time when we need our kids to be sharper than we are. So thank you guys so much for
All right. So, as you can see, he said he referenced technology being in the classroom since 1960s, starting then. So we've been on a decline of that since then, right? It's just that the first time we've seen every single domain show up on testing worse than my generation, because he's in my generation, okay? So, so that's a big problem. This is a pretty big problem. So I wanted to point that out so you guys are aware of the, well, hopefully are as alarmed as I was alarmed as I started working in this field. Okay? All right, so any questions about that?
What was about the exam?
That guy? Oh, ooh, I'd have to go, I'll answer you after the presentation. All right, yeah, no problem. All right, so according to the Cleveland Clinic, there are 6 pillars of good brain health, right? We have, of course, we have get moving. Exercising is always good, right? Exercise is good. Seeking out mental challenges, that's hard because where are you going to be mentally challenged? Not stressed out, just mentally challenged, right? Where you can eat smart, or you need to eat smart. Be social, get enough sleep, and of course, take control of our health. Those are things that we definitely want to do. Those are the pillars to actually having to start the foundation of a strong brain. Now, so for adults and for kids can be similar things. We have what we call 6 goals for cognitive fitness. And with those ideas, we're going to try a few today, of course. But the first goal is to improve your sleep. Sleep is very important. Why do you guys think sleep's important? Let's see for the non-medical people in the room. Do you guys know what happens when you go to sleep to your brain? It resets. It files things away. Maybe. Yeah, except for the non-medical people. It does. If you sleep well, it definitely gets you ready for the next day. So, that's true. I like to think of your brain as like a massive city, super city. Like you see, I don't know if you ever guys have seen a picture of Manhattan. I should have did it on the screen. And you see all the skyscrapers. If you ever been to New York City too, and especially in Manhattan, you'll see that sometimes that city gets very, very dirty, right? You see trash all up and down the roads. Your brain does that every time that you're awake. It does the same thing. Trash up and down the roads. So when you get good sleep, it starts to want to clean up that city. And so we're going to talk about those. So we need to improve our sleep. We want to make sure we feed ourselves the right stuff. If you're following good Adventist health message food, probably like Wade probably does, you probably do some good stuff. Move your body, of course, right? Get good exercise. Connect meaningfully with others. The way that we do, or we spend time fellowshipping, like the potlucks and things like that. Do that a little bit more often. That'll help, right? Meaningful conversations. Really caring about other people, people caring about you. And of course, we gotta manage our stress. We can talk about that too at some point. And then lastly, we gotta exercise our brain. And that's the part I'm focused on. Now, but I do wanna say, in improving your sleep, what happens is that we get to clear toxins, right? It supports, when it happens, it supports long-term memory. It stabilizes your emotions. And then, of course, enhances our cognitive performance. So I like this show, right, you got your brain being washed. So your brain shrinks down to about 60% of its size at night when you're going through good, deep sleep. Yeah. And then it's literally, and then it shoots spinal fluid up into that cavity that's now got space, and it washes off those toxins. So that water dripping that you see there is really spinal fluid, right? If you had to imagine it that way. And it knocks all that toxins off of the roads in between the buildings, right? And then processes out the rest of your body and your waste system. Yeah, we're pretty complicated. Very, very complicated. Who would have thunk that a single cell organism could turn into this one day? I'm joking. All right, so, so that's a big deal. All right, so, to help with your sleep, we're gonna modify some habits. One of the things we wanna make sure you're doing is like, if this is a problem, now, so some of these things are general, not all of this stuff is, so we're speaking in generalities. Like, so some problems that I don't even have, like, so this is a big one that doesn't bother me much. Blue light exposure, I can fall asleep at a drop of a dime. Doesn't bother me, right? But for other people, most people, that's a problem. So you wanna get rid of the blue light which represents kind of like sunlight. You wanna get that out of your face for at least an hour is what they say before you try to go to bed. You wanna be in a quiet, cool, dark room. That's super helpful, right? Consistent bedtime and wake time. So if your bedtime needs to be like, 10:30, make sure you're in bed by 10:30 every night, right? And then of course, reduce your caffeine and or alcohol consumption levels. Those are both very, very bad for you when it comes to when to sleep. Caffeine does what? Does anybody know? What does caffeine do?
Stimulate.
Yeah, but what does it do? Stimulates, but how? Say again?
Stimulates your activity in your brain.
But how? Like, what is it doing to you? Like, is it giving you energy? Is it?
Yeah.
It's giving you, right? So most people say that, right? Gives you energy. It actually doesn't do that. It actually disrupts the connectors, the signals in your head, the transmitters that say you're tired. So it almost like coats it and says, hey, so what happens is when your body tells your brain, hey, we're tired, your brain goes, I can't hear you because of the caffeine. And so that's why you jitter, because when you get tired and things strain, that's why you're jittering. Not because you actually got too much energy and you're just, like a kid. It's really because your body is tired, and you need to give it a break so it can actually not. So you need to actually rest so that you can not be tired. And that's why having good sleep will fix that problem, anyways. So I have tons of energy. I sleep great. My wife could probably tell you. And I can wake up and go like this. No caffeine. And of course, get up after 15 minutes of insomnia, if you have insomnia, right? Sleep restrictions, in bed only for sleep or the adult activities. All right, fuel your body. Want to make sure we're eating well. I like to show these things because these are important for people to understand. The next goal for optimizing your cognitive fitness and for being an adult is giving your body good foods to eat that support brain function and reducing the consumption of foods that are bad for our brains. So what does that look like, right? Berries, green leafy vegetables, lean proteins, omega-3 fatty acids. Yes?
Can we go back a minute?
Go back a minute.
When it said to get up after 15 minutes if you don't go to sleep, what does that do?
What does that do? It gets you in a mode of like resetting. So you're not just sitting there thinking about things. Sitting there thinking, because your body gets used to a routine, right? The routine of just
Stay up after you completely sleep.
till you're sleepy. You should be getting sleepy. If you're not getting sleepy, there's some sleep therapists that I can refer you to.
I can be so sleepy sitting on the couch that I can't read a sentence. As soon as I lay down, I'm awake.
Yeah, because you probably gave yourself a bad habit of what happens in bed. It's almost like resetting yourself. So I'd say sleep in the chair. But I don't sleep well on the couch, but I sleep really good in my bed. So that was my habit. I don't know the habit you gave yourself. That's why a lot of things about us, we got to kind of retrain and reset. That's why I say get up. Don't lay in bed and have the bad habit there. Get up and get out, right? Walk around your house. Get cold again. Yeah, 15, 20 minutes. And most of the time, at least for me, it works, for sure. For the rare times that I may have an issue. All right, berries, green leafy vegetables, lean proteins, omega-3 fatty acids, which are found in avocados. There you go. Who said flaxseed? Flaxseed as well. See, Sarah said salmon for those people that still eat fish. Yeah. Omega-3 fatty acids are found in a lot of things. If you like the Mediterranean diet, that's a big deal when it comes to eating really well. That's this. And of course, lots and lots of water. How much water should you be drinking? 2 quarts? There you go. It's a supper club of thing that you learn. All right, foods that don't support the brain. Number one thing. Go back. This is gonna be on you. It'll be on YouTube. But I'll put it back. They're taking pictures.
You don't put it online?
It's gonna be. They're doing it right now, streaming. Well, right now, it'll be there. Ready?
What's your educational background?
You missed that. We have to go all the way back to the background. So, yeah, all right. I'm a board certified cognitive development professional. I background education, computer science and mathematics, right? So you think about the logic and rationality of how do you think and how we think to make things do things. I got into this from the standpoint of it's harder to try to always program for our mistakes. Why don't we just stop making as many mistakes? Why do we make mistakes? We make mistakes because we don't think well. We don't remember information. Like I sat at a table, here you go, Wade. I sat at a table last week with Joanna, and we shared each other's birthdays, right? So you were 26. Do you remember the lady to your right? What was her date? She was to your right. So in between me and you. She was in between me and you. Where were we sitting? We were sitting right here.
To my right.
I was to your right, but there's somebody between me and you. Yeah. June. June was between us.
June was on the other side of me, to the left.
There was a little girl on the other side of you. Oh, yeah. You don't remember. If not, I'm remembering. Right? We sat in, so we had the same exact experience. I'm recalling it. Juneville was next to you. Right? You trust me. I promise. Right? June was, well, sorry. Right. So going back to what happens, right? When we misremember, we have problems, conflicts. Because we're talking about the same situation, two different events are now popping up, right? So one of us is right, we could both be wrong, right? Or one of us is right, one of us is wrong. And so that's why having a strong brain, or people having stronger brains, starts to reduce a lot of conflict. Point on that. But my point is that I remember a lot of stuff, right? I do this, not only do I go through the process, and it's almost like you can trust me on that. When I say, hey, it works. It's almost like being in shape. I can lift this. How do I know it? Because I lift things like this, right? It's part of the process. Anyways, foods that don't support the brain: sugar, ultra-processed foods, pesticides on non-organic foods, right? Those are the things that don't support the brains. All right, real fast, we'll see this is my little memory trick or game, recall. When was her birthday? Did you remember that? You remember that? Did you remember that? You were sitting right next to her. Did you remember? Maybe. Maybe. All right. Thank you for being honest. Good job. All right. So we want to make sure we're exercising right. That's how you move the body. Benefits on the brain. Improved cognition. Did you know you can get new neurons? So we used to say back in the day, once you kill a brain cell, it's gone, but that's not true. And it reduces neuroinflammation. Yeah, your brain cells can have problems. That's the thing you don't want. This is why you need to sleep well and then exercise, right, Zara? Right. And of course, all of that protects against cognitive decline, right? You're able to quickly kind of think at a high level. We want to make sure we connect with others. This is a big deal that we don't do as much anymore because of social media and things that happen online, right? So we can stream things so we don't meet as much as we should, or we don't ask enough questions about what's going on with somebody else so you actually care. So the benefits of that, though, lower risk of dementia, number one, unless people want to have dementia. And of course, that slows your cognitive decline. And of course, it enhances neuroplasticity, which is your brain's ability to create new brain cells and fix some damaged routes. And of course, it increases our cognitive reserve. I like to call that our cognitive load. So people get stressed out fast when their brain's weak. person does or gets flustered? Yeah, because their brain's really strong. You're asking them to lift, toys instead of blocks. Concrete blocks, that is. All right. And then, of course, we need to manage our stress. Stress triggers inflammation because these are where the chemicals in our brain pops up. This part's kind of boring, but it allows us to, it causes problems, stresses does, because of the other chemicals that can pop up in our brain, especially if you're not getting good sleep. Right? It shrinks our hippocampus, which is where we make a lot of great decisions. Got it? All right. Increases Alzheimer's risk. Reduces sound perception. And then, of course, it reduces our neuroplasticity, which is a person's brain's ability to change. Right? The more stressed out somebody is, the harder it's going to take us to get your brain to think, to be in the position to start thinking about other ways to win, or to take an advantage out of life, taking advantage of what would seemingly be a bad situation. We solve problems in bad situations. Very few people solve problems sitting on the beach relaxing. There's no problems there. Right, Mike? That's why Mike's here. He was solving problems. All right, tips for managing stress. So, of course, sleep, nutrition, exercise, socialization, right? The reality that I know is that life is always full of stress. So even if we can't make changes that reduce stress, we can certainly do things to help manage it, right? So interestingly, some of the best ways to manage stress are the same ways we've talked about to improve overall brain health, including sleep, nutrition, and social exercise, or exercise and social support. But there are a few more that haven't been talked about, and we can easily learn those things. I'm a big proponent of this particular one, mindfulness, meditation, and relaxation. I love relaxation. For my birthday every year, I like relaxation. What do you want to do, Doug? You guys leave. I'll stay here. Relax. Meditation, so there's different forms of meditation. The one I like to do the most is to focus on my breathing. I like to do box breathing. That chills me out. If you don't, you've heard of it? You haven't? Box breathing is where you can, I like to do 5 seconds. So I'm going to breathe in deeply for 5 seconds. Then I'm going to hold my breath for 5 seconds, right? Then I'm going to breathe out for the 5 seconds, and I'm going to have no air in for that same 5 seconds, and I start over. And I'll do that for like 5 minutes at a time. So you can build up to like 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And when you're doing that, and you're thinking about the breathing and the time it takes to breathe, only thing you're thinking about is your breathing. Right?
You do that for like 45 minutes?
You can work your way up to that. I say you start with 5. In a quick pinch, 5 minutes is what I like to do. You can start your day. I start my day off like that a lot of times, at least 3 times a week. Mindfulness. I like to think about what I'm thinking about. I check my thoughts. The Bible says, capture your thoughts through the obedience of Christ. That's my mindfulness. Do I let my circumstances tell me what's happening, or do I tell my circumstances what's happening? It's mindfulness, right? You capture your thoughts. Think about what you're thinking about. Don't let your thoughts just run rogue. And of course, time management and organization. If you know where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be, you don't really get caught off guard. And of course, throw some hobbies in there. Have some fun. I love playing pickleball. I played pickleball this morning. And then I guess a fun activity is socialization with my friends. So I meet with my friends. Some of them we meet virtually. I have guys, friends from around the Southeast. So we'll sit and chop it up and talk about things throughout the week that happened to us. And we do that too. So those are my quick hobbies. And of course, if you need help, you could have distress tolerance therapy, which is where people teach you certain tactics to help yourself that's individualized for you. All right, now let's talk about some fun stuff. Let's exercise your mind. How would we go about the process of exercising your mind? Right? We talked about, earlier I said, hey, we need to seek out mental challenges, right? We need to focus on complex thinking. We need to engage our brain, allows us to stay curious and so that we can keep learning. And pick up an instrument, a new language or hobby. You can learn to play the guitar. There's people in here that in this room right now that can probably teach you how to play the guitar, and your brain will thank you if you did it. Okay? And of course, exercise our brain. So, other than maybe saying picking up a new hobby from or a new language or like a new instrument, how would you do the complex thinking one? I'm gonna ask my medical professional in the room so she knows. Check out this one. You know? Got an idea?
I was thinking like puzzles or something, or word puzzle, like crossword or something.
Like crossword or something? Maybe. Do you like crossword puzzles?
Not particularly.
So for her, yeah. Sudoku is a good one.
Yeah, that works.
That's a good one.
That's what I'm thinking.
It's not bad.
So the things that you don't enjoy, your brain's gonna work harder.
Boom. Because your brain's really lazy.
Or
Because we're pretty lazy, so.
puzzles work as well.
Word puzzles?
No, like actual
Oh, puzzles. Maybe. Maybe. I always like to say maybe. So there's a lot of what we call, there's a difference between brain games and brain training. We're going to play a brain game that could be a part of brain training here in a little while, right? So doing these activities are like playing a brain game, right? There may be a slight benefit to that. But it's like going to the gym. Actually, I'll put it this way. How many people, show of hands, how many people have ever had a gym membership? How many people have ever canceled that same gym membership? Right? Show of hands, right? Right? So all the same people, right? So why did you cancel the gym membership? Huh? You didn't use it enough? Why did you cancel? You moved? No results. Okay, so let's talk to the person who had no results. Why didn't you get results?
I don't know why. That's why I quit, because I wasn't getting results.
Okay, so to me, playing brain games, you will stop playing them as much as you probably should, because you're not going to get the result you thought you would get if you were playing them for a better brain performance. And I'm going to tell you why she didn't get a good result. Did you go through a process where they understood exactly why you were out of shape?
I had a trainer.
No. Okay, listen to my question. Did you go through a process that let you know, or let them know, you and them, right? The trainer, because you had one, exactly why you were out of shape? So she didn't know what to do. So then you work with another person who just looked at you and goes, I'm going to guess at what to do, the trainer. And then you guys worked on something, and it didn't work out. Okay? Brain training is the process of understanding why your brain's not performing or how your brain's performing overall, right? So we start off with an assessment, right? Then we know what your brain's not doing or what is doing well, and then we can take you through a process of what we're going to make better about that, right? And we talk about that. So that's how we know. So if back in the day, I've worked with a trainer, and then one of the things that we've also did was like, hey, we did a blood test, and they said, okay, we need to work out your body like this. You need to eat foods like this. You probably don't know that you have a lactose sensitivity, so let's not eat these things, right, as a part of the journey. And then you're in your best shape of your life, and you're like, wow, look what happens with that. Now you get results. Okay? So that's the best way to attack the problem, which is why most people want to go to a gym anyways, is to have a goal about it, right, to solve that problem. So seeking a mental challenge, a complex thing, is not necessarily thinking like, what's the hardest thing I can do? It's where's the weakest area of my thinking components, and let's work on that, right? All right, so ways we can get advantage. Learn new skills or hobbies, read, write creatively. Who likes to still write and journal? One person? Two persons? You guys write still? Do you still write? You do?
I've never enjoyed journaling.
Well, not journal. I said write creatively. I should say that. I assumed journaling is creative writing.
I like hobbies.
What's your hobby?
Sewing and,
Sewing?
yeah.
I like a hobby. I like playing the piano.
Okay. Could you trade that hobby out sewing for a new hobby?
I like to add a hobby.
You have time to add a hobby?
Not necessarily, but,
See, that's the gym stuff, right? When you quit, you're like, I'm not gonna add that.
but the way I create is like, I think of new things I could do
Mm.
with it.
Mm-hmm.
Creative.
Yeah. All right. That's the low-hanging fruit. To take the bigger jump, it's almost like, do I want to walk or walk up a hill? What's going to do better? What's going to be more beneficial? Walking up the hill. So I'm saying, when you switch out the hobby, it's like walking more up the hill. Yeah, you like walking.
Plateaued, I might need to add something to it,
Well, or change it up.
change it up.
Yeah. Then come back to it. That may take a dive, maybe, while then when you come back to it, you'll get more out of it. Potentially to do that, right? Take classes. Maybe learn something on like, AI. I don't know. AI's pretty cool. Don't knock it till you try it. And I mean by meaning that, like, if you're creative enough to how to use that as a tool to be creative. It's not like, I'm not saying like turn life over to AI. That's not what I'm saying.
No. My husband talks to like 4 or 5 different AI people. AI stuff, so
Oh,
it's too much.
oh, for him. Puzzles or games, which we talked about a little bit. Travel somewhere new. Go to East Knoxville or something. No, I'm playing. Just joking. Or Mechanicsville. You been there? That's East Knoxville somewhere. It's Mechanicsville. It's like these little tiny, small little pockets around that you learn about town if you get to travel over there. And then, of course, use technology. Like, for real, use it. Mm-hmm. My favorite technology is like the Roomba. It can vacuum the floors for you.
How does that enhance your brain cognitivity?
Well, you got to program it. And then when it starts bumping into a wall, and then it stops in the middle of the floor before it's done, and you're like, this is dumb. I'm going to move it and just go back to vacuuming by hands. That's what I did. Well, I got 2 first, and then after the second one did the same thing. I'm like, I guess these things don't actually do what you think they're going to do. Anyways, all right. Sometimes we need more than just engagement of our skills. We need what we call cognitive skills training. Because especially if we're noticing that we're struggling or somebody's struggling with like memory or focus or reaction time, we need a more formal way to exercise our brains, and that's called cognitive skills training. Or brain training, that's what I talked about earlier. But what does that mean? So, targeted, repeated, intense mental tasks based on neuroplasticity. That's what we do, or I do, right? And so that's how we improve our cognitive skills. So, let's look at it. There's 2 parts to being smart. I hear this all the time, and I'm glad I get to tell you guys this. I hear parents tell me a lot, more parents than anybody else, my kid is smart. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, when you say my kid is smart, what does that mean?
They don't know.
I mean, they don't know. They just say it, right? And so there needs to be a definition that we all agree on. But there's 2 parts to being smart. And we know that we have, of course, our reading, our math, our spelling, our science, our history, our grammar, which is the knowledge part. And then, of course, our ability to actually plug that into anything we know is based off of our ability to pay attention, have a strong memory, be able to process things from a logic and a reasoning standpoint, our processing speed, our auditory processing, our visual processing. All those things need to be present and strong in a person in order to do those things well. So, right? And when it comes to adults, how we're handling politics, religion, culture, how to cook, how to drive, how to work. Speaking of that real fast, I thought it was really funny. Let's see if you guys know or remember this thing. So, why did Jesus tell parables?
So those that had ears could hear, those that didn't wouldn't know.
Boom. But what do people generally say about parables? So why didn't all of you say that fast?
What did she say?
She said that basically Jesus told parables to protect information. He said those who have ears could hear, but those who couldn't wouldn't know. But a lot of people say that Jesus spoke in parables so things would be made plain and easy. But that's not even what he said. Okay? So my point is, I always wonder when Jesus says, well, when he said that, those who have ears, let him hear. I'm like, everybody has ears. What's wrong? I think that this, especially nowadays, is what's wrong. When these aren't working well, you cannot hear, which means hear mean understand. Understand how to apply. That make sense? If a kid is smart or a person is smart, they will understand how to apply and when to apply. When you cannot do that or you don't do that well, you're not that smart. Sorry to tell you. And even adults, same thing. If you don't understand what's going on here, my people perish for a lack of knowledge. What do you mean? All the book's right in front of me. When you struggle in those areas, it's because of something that's happening here. How long does it take? What is the boiling point of water? Does everybody remember? She said 225. What do you say? Depends where you are. The temperature, what is the temperature that water boils at? 212. Yeah, see, that has never changed. Right? Now, there's some other factors you could say. You could say it doesn't ever actually matter because if you leave a pool in 75-degree water and just let the pool sit there, water will actually evaporate and it never boiled. How'd that happen? I can explain that to you later. That's a whole physics, chemistry thing. But either way, when your brain is strong, you can learn a lot of, you would say useful or useless information really fast and it doesn't go away. You just remember it and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Right? You know how to apply a thing, and then later on you may know when to apply a thing. That's where this happens. Like how to drive to work. Do you drive to work because you just use the GPS all the time, or are you driving to work as it assists you, so you're skipping certain parts of traffic? And then what happens if the GPS doesn't use the back roads correctly like you would use because you grew up in that city? The most interesting thing to me in the world was when we were teaching Malik how to drive. Some of you knows where we live, but we live like, say, actually, right behind Asbury Acres. So imagine you're just coming here. Say you're coming here. And I said to Malik, we were at the courthouse in Maryville, and we're pulling up to Lamar Alexander from Court Street, and we're stopping at the light. And he says to me, which way should I go? And I said, you've lived here for 16 years. Actually, 17 years at the time. I said, you don't know which way to go? He came to learn X too. He knows how to get home now. But anyways, but that was very interesting to watch a person who, because of technology and because of whatever the world gave them, they don't pay attention to where they're even at. So then I would ask, why did it get anxious?
Because it was non-confident.
Not confidence doesn't have anything to do with it. Your brain doesn't know anything about confidence. Your brain doesn't know anything about confidence. That's like a feeling, right? Confidence. What is confidence?
There is a difference because when I talk about brain, I think of a rational part of me, but then when I think of anxiety, I think of the emotional part of me.
Right?
And so
now we can talk about this fundamentally differently, but I would say that a lot of times, especially in that case, the driving case, right? You're not confident. Why? You're not strong enough. You didn't practice enough. So, right?
For example, not that you are an intimidating person, but maybe it was intimidating by you.
I didn't say anything. I wasn't telling him what to do. He was just driving home. He just asked me which way to go. That has nothing to do knowing which way to go, not how fast, not stop. That I would understand, but like, where do I go now, type of thing. That was what it was.
Yeah, I understood what you were
Yeah,
meant.
yeah. But in that situation, anxiety was not a factor. And actually, I can't wait for a study to come out on this, but I suspect the people who have stronger skills actually have less anxiety.
Those people, when they're stronger.
When they're stronger, you will have less.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
because
Andrew doesn't have any anxiety whatsoever.
and he probably has strong skills.
He has a lot of skills. I am super anxious about everything.
Do we know how strong your skills are? Do you know how strong your skills are? Why do you look back there? No, I'm asking you if you know how strong your skills are. You don't know. So what needs to happen maybe? I like to, I'm not gonna, well, I'll say it here because I used it on another a podcast I was on a while ago. I like to call the problem where first off, we don't know our skills, and because of the way technology has been doing us for the last, as that guy stated, right, 60 plus years, we are actually going through what we call a mental obesity crisis. We don't know how heavy we are, and then we don't even know that it's a problem. Until somebody goes, hey, wait a second, all these kids can't do this thing. Why not? We have mentally obese, we're mentally obese. He brought snacks, I should have brought snacks. Anyways. I served dinner? All right, that's an early dinner. That's an early dinner. Oh yes, that's actually smart. It does matter. So then 2 hours at least before getting ready for bed process. Look at you, smart. That's a brain thing too, brain hack for kids.
Less of your energy working on digesting, more being able to.
You have to do all the process. Look at her. She's been reading some books. All right, one or two. So here's what we look at. We have our inputs that come in. We have our automatic process down here. Your attention, working memory, your processing speed, right? As you grow, you're gonna have information, new and known. It always goes into your knowledge bank over here, right? Now, I like to say this, whether the information that's going in there is right or wrong, it's gonna go into your knowledge bank. The way to make sure that it's most appropriately correct in here is to give yourself the chance of having strong skills here. So whatever goes in here, when it comes out, is correct. Or advantageous just to you. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. You're my litmus. It is a busy slide. There's a lot going on. Yeah. Things come in, it gets processed. We're gonna do an activity in a second, and it's gonna use all your brain. So 100% of your brain is used at all times, just so you guys know. I know people like to say we only use 10% of our brain. Not true. Use 100% of it. It's just that you want to make sure that 100% you're using is actually strong. Like, as I'm walking, am I using 100% of my body? Yeah. But does that test my strength? No. So the stronger I become, the more or further I can go, or the less pain I'm going to be in. Same thing here. The stronger your brain becomes, the more you can expect of yourself. The more, as I like to use, confident you become. All right. Oh, you see that? Oh. So let me demonstrate. All right, so let's play this game. Oops. All right, so let's play this game. All right, so I am going to have you guys, I'm going to say a direction, and I want you guys to say the direction I said. Actually, we'll play the easy way first. So I'm going to say a direction. I want you guys to point in the direction that I say at all times. All right, so I'm going to say up, you're going to point up. When I say down, you point down. When I say left, you point left. I'm pointing your left, right? And then when I say right, you point right. Okay? Okay, that's how we're gonna start the game off. Everybody should be doing the same thing together. Okay? Don't drop that glass of juice on the ground. All right. So you guys ready? Up, down, left, right, right, left, up, down. All right, everybody's doing great. All right, so now we're gonna change the game up a little bit. I'm gonna want you guys, this is like medium level. We're gonna go to hard level in a minute, but we're gonna do, when I say the direction, I want you to point in the opposite direction. Okay? You can do this. I believe in you. You guys ready? Ready? Up, down, left, right, left. Ooh, they're pointing at each other. They're pointing at each other. All right. This happens, right? Up. Yep, down. up, down, left, right, left, right. She did it again. All right, that's good. You like? So I like to do this. So, but you didn't make any mistakes with up and down. So my question is, if you do this, right, would you then confuse up and down? You see what I'm saying? What's the difference between left and down, up and down, and left and right? Perspective, right? If I had my skills up there, I could point at them, the strength of those, right? Right. The stronger those things are, the faster your brain is to understand the perspective it's looking at. Just like that. Right. So here's what we're gonna do now. We're gonna make it a little bit harder. I want you to repeat after me, and repeat after me, but do the same thing. Okay? Repeat after me. So if I say up, you say up, and you do what? Point down. Yeah, you're still doing the same thing. We're just gonna repeat after me. So it allows me to know that you understand the direction. Right? It's like when you ask your kid, hey, I want you to go do X, Y, Z, and you say, what did I say? And they say X, Y, Z, and you go, okay, at least they understood what I said. Now the execution of that is the pointing. Okay? Ready?
Do you want us to point in the same direction that you say though?
I want you to point in the opposite.
Okay.
You're still doing the same thing. You're just saying what I'm saying now. All right? You guys ready? Down. She said up. You see what I mean? All right. Left. Right. Now you notice how much slower you guys are moving? Because you're having to think about doing more than two things. So you tell the instruction, and then you watch the process, and it goes a lot slower sometimes. So the point of the game is really to demonstrate when we work these things out, we get better and faster at thinking. Right? We're doing what we call a fundamental game, right? And it would be a part of a brain training journey if somebody's on it, especially if we're going to improve attention. Because there's three types of attention. Your selective attention, which is what we kind of did in the very beginning, just do what I ask you, point, right? Where we just do it, I said it, you point in the right direction. That's the sustained. Selective is now where I say something, and you do the opposite. You have to select, listen, and then do something else. And then the other one is what we call divided attention. He said this, I got to say it too, and then do this, the opposite. It's divided attention. So you got to pay all three in that one. As we do a few more adult-like things and get a little bit more advanced in our journey of life, divided attention is what's needed. It's got to be strong. I got to remember what I'm doing. I got to be focused on what the instruction was, and I got to be able to deliver it right, properly, right? We want to make sure we improve those things. And when you can do that, there's a whole lot of other things that can be added to that too, right? We can do logic and reasoning games, or not games, logic and reasoning improvement challenges in that realm. So how do you solve yourself through certain problems? I like to say this, and you've heard people say this too, how you see the problem is the problem, right? So we got to be able to see the problem right. When she said, I get problems with my ups and downs, so I said, okay, well, or my left and right. So I said, well, let's make the left and rights ups and downs. Right? Does that fix the problem? Maybe. It should. You didn't get any up and downs wrong. Wade's not doing a good job back there teaching you left and rights. That's what that means. Anyways, questions about anything? I'm pretty much at the end. All right. So, when we are struggling, with our cognitive skills, you may notice that there might be a problem, and there could be a problem with more than one of them at one time. That's a big deal, right? And so that's when it's time to look at what we call formal intervention, and that's where cognitive skills training plays a part. So one of the things I get to do with the Knoxville First Church is I get to do these presentations to parents at their school. And then, depending on what's happening with those kids, we get to work with them at LearnerX. Sometimes we go to their school too, but it just depends on what's going on. But it's a really big deal of how we help. We've helped families. A lot of people send kids to homeschool and private school, not because the kid really needs to be homeschooled or in a private school, but it's because they're not actually producing the results in the public school system that they would like them to see. And the reason why that's happening is because they have, most like times, it's because of weak skills. although I still prefer private schools over public school education. And just a quick side note, maybe I'm not getting paid for this, but a tiny commercial for Clayton Bradley Academy. If you see how that private school does in education, I don't know how anybody would send their kid to a public school. And actually, I actually do some things with Knox County school system, and I asked the teachers there, I said, hey, have you guys ever went and seen what the private schools are doing? All of them said no. They probably should go check them out. But anyways, all right, so what we do at LearnerX is we do one-on-one human delivery. Everybody that works with us gets their own brain trainer because your problem or what you need to get better at is going to be different than what she needs to get better at, right? And so we want to make sure that everybody can do their own thing or gets their personal results that they're looking for. And as Bonnie left, but we have over 1,000 different tasks depending on what you need to do. You don't do all 1,000, but depending on how we need to take your journey, we really don't understand how to take your journey where it needs to go. All right. So I just played the game Switch It already. That worked on your cognitive flexibility, which for you, as we would improve that type of a game, where I can add things to it to make it more complex, that would improve your cognitive flexibility, and of course your attention. See, we pointed opposite arrow. All right, results. So, how do I know what we do actually is real and how it works? We do a lot of studies. So when I talk to you guys, I'm not talking to you guys about things that I think happens. We know this happens. Our company's been doing studies for the last, 10 plus years at least at this point. In this particular study of all adults, we had almost 3,000 participants. And when we look at their long-term memory, their visual processing, right, these right there, auditory processing, logical reasoning, you can see these is where they came in, these levels, and this is where they went out. You see this? IQ changes for adults. We're published in lots of different areas. We speak on stage at the American Psychological Association. We're in a lot of places. Journal of Mental Health and Clinical Psychology. We are part of the SAGE research methods. Frontiers in Human Neuroscience. We have journals that we're in as well. We're all over the place. Everything we do is peer reviewed. All of it. Our peers believe in what we do as well, right? So, we have peer-reviewed research published in medical and psychology journals, and these are just a few of them. All right, so our published research results shows significant cognitive improvement in memory, speed of processing, reasoning skills, visualization, attention, auditory and language processing, and of course, overall cognitive efficiency improvement. So, how do I know if I need cognitive training? If you're asking yourself that question, what do I say? You gotta get tested. You could say, yeah, I would like to be better, my brain should be doing X, Y, Z, but that to say just start playing games, that's not a way to go. Because you will do something that's too easy, or you'll do something that's so hard that you'll want to do it. So we understand what's going on. Then, of course, trust your instincts. If you feel like you're slipping at any point, if you're an older adult, don't wait. That's the main things, right? So, did I go backwards? And of course, we like to say we have expertise you can trust. A lot of people I work with, we're a system of been training brains for 30 plus years. We've trained total nationwide over 130,000 kids and adults from age 4 to 99. My oldest is like 74, personally. My youngest is 4 years old. And that little girl, if you've seen what that little girl was doing by the time we were done with her, you'd be amazed. I'm sure she's skipping grades, for sure. Her parents were like, can you guys teach my kid how to like fundamentally do all the beginning stuff? So instead of going to preschool, they came to us, which is what I do with my kids now. If you teach somebody how, like the principles of thinking, all the other stuff they're gonna ask them to do in school is gonna be easy for them. What's 2 plus 2? Well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 things. How do do you start that process? By showing them how you actually process things in front of you. What's up, what's under, what's adjacent to, right? A lot of those things. And a lot of that stuff they actually can learn by just watching, being involved in whatever you're doing, right? So they may not know it, like to say it out loud, but my kids watch me make rice, like perfectly, by the way, in a steel pan, no sticking. You ask my wife, she'll tell you sister, right? And they know, depending on the rice, if we use jasmine or basmati, the ratio of liquid to rice. Because they watch me do it. Huh? What? No. No. Pour is like 2 cups, 2 to 1, or 1 and a quarter, and 3/4 to 1. That's not, I've never heard that. That sounds crazy. But I put beans in my rice. I put beans in the rice too, so maybe that's why, maybe not. But that's interesting. We have centers in 45 countries around the world. And then of course our oversight is by psychologists, neuroscientists, audiologists, and educational specialists. So we have meetings all the time about changes, updates, different things that are happening, what's doing what. If you have a really tough client or case, those are as well. And of course, we're supported by our peer-reviewed research, right? We don't do things that people on the outside or people that's not a part of our organization also can attest to it working. So we're really good at what we do. And for more information on us, you can go to learningrx.com. Easy to find us. And of course, if you want to give us a call here, you can email me there, or not just me, but email the team there, and then you can call us at that number. And the other thing that I buried, I don't know if I buried it, but I didn't tell you, is there are programs that we're associated with for the state of Tennessee that could potentially help pay for services like ours. And so but you gotta call in to find out, right? So that's a big deal. It depends. So, yeah. Questions? Thank you guys for your time. I wasn't doing anything but gonna relax. Anyways, but yeah, no questions about anything? Nothing? How mushy is the brain? What happens with gray matter?
I actually have a question with the 4-year-old.
Hmm?
What led the parents to bring her at that age?
Oh, I think they just heard it. So we're also in a couple of magazines around Knoxville. And so if you look at the data or some of the things that we had online, our website has changed since then. You can come to the conclusion I think pretty easily that this may be better than going to school. Especially if a kid's struggling, a lot of people are like, oh, well, they got to get, so the problem that we have is, it's not really a problem, but we legally have to send our kids to school, right? But you don't have to legally make sure they do well. So this kid wasn't really school age yet, so they wanted to make sure she was going to do well. And if their kid can do well in school, what do you get to do as a parent? What? You say pray? Oh, say it again? Sorry. Bray? Brag. I wasn't expecting that at all, so it threw me off. I was like, what? All right, brag. Yeah, you can brag, but the part that's the most important part to you, I think, is that you don't actually got to help in the homework process. So it's a lot of saves on your time, saves on any type of conflict that could potentially exist, right? I mean, I've heard of stories where the kid would be, if the mom is talking to the kid, this is a real story, he'd be pouring the milk, and she's getting on him about doing something, and if he was pouring, the milk would overflow because he couldn't keep up with pouring his milk and listening to what she wanted. And then I remember her saying, he doesn't do that anymore. That was a really interesting thing. And it's just interesting to listen to all the different stories. I've had one kid, 2 fun stories at the end with kids, one said that we got him to the point where he could actually read. He was in almost 7th grade. So he's in 7th grade. If you met the kid, he's a very normal kid, but he was in LD classes, learning disability classes, and he struggled to read, which is one of the factors that'll get you in the LD classes. Anyways, by the time we were done, he's reading, doing fine, and I thought that he'd be like, I can read, I can do these things, and I can learn this information. He said, I don't get spanked anymore. Because now he's not acting up in school. So that's a big deal for him. Another child, there's a cousins were coming to the center, and one was a girl, one's a boy. The boy was known as a class clown. By the time he was done, one of the complaints that was made by the other cousin, the girl, was that he's no longer the class clown, so he's not as much fun. Why was he the class clown? Because he couldn't do what he was needed to do, so he just disrupted class. Right?
Could it help with kids that are classified as ADHD?
Oh, 100%. If you go to our site, you'll see like all the different classifications of people we do help. This was kind of like more adult focused because, supper club, right? But yeah, ADHD, what was called dyslexia, they're taking that away. It's not that anymore. But those are big factors. People on the spectrum, mild cognitive impairment. Yeah, it's a lot of different factors that we cover, that we help people with.
I mean, smart kids, but ADHD, they can't.
Yeah. So most people who have ADHD problems have a working memory issue. Working memory issue. 70% of people who struggle with or have that diagnosis, their problem is not even with attention, it's in memory. Yeah, that is a So we put them through the process of improving those things. Now, testing tells us for sure. That's why there's 70%, right? So there could be 30% where it could be attention or it could be something else. And so the factors is understanding what's going on there, and then we can have a bigger, broader, get them to the point where that's not the struggle. Right?
Does, does your place take in, traditional insurance, or is it more like out of pocket?
It's out of pocket. We do have the ability to help in the reimbursement process, and depending on, like I was saying earlier, depending on if they have a diagnosis, there's most of the time, it's a pretty high percentage. I don't know, I can't quote it right now, but most often a kid or a person with one neurodevelopmental issue has more than one. So if that's the case, then we also can help get funding for that through the state of Tennessee. So there's ways the skin to help. And then one of the things that we're really big about being a plus helper to the community here. And so we try to work within the family's budget and try not to make it super a negative impact to them. We definitely want to help. It's a big deal to us. You want to say something? Ask something?
I was just going to ask you, you were saying spectrum like autism?
Yeah. They don't like to say autism anymore, so I try to, if I get in trouble. So we just say on the spectrum. Because you meet one person on the spectrum, you've only met one person on the spectrum. Right? Yes. Yeah. Questions? Any questions on this side of the room? Oh, there was questions back there.
1 3/4 of 2, which is Basmati and which is Jasmine.
Jasmine's 2, Basmati is the other one.
Okay, so someone asked what the name of the person was, and I went back in the stream, and it was Dr. Jared Cooney Horvath.
Yeah, Dr. Jared Horvath.
Can you spell the last name?
They got it for you. Look at me having an assistant in the back of the room. Good call. Thank you. And that's it.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you guys. Make sure you guys are walking up hills.
All right, before you guys go, anybody that needs to put their name in the drawing bucket? No, everybody did? Okay. Huh? I'm sorry. You can still do it. That's what I'm saying. Huh?
How'd I do, Zara? Thank you. Oh, you got me some grapes? No. Oh, thank you so much. Oh, okay. No, thank you. That wasn't too bad, right?